In the next 72 days, Nigerians will troop out and choose their preferred candidates for various electoral positions.
Now, so it is game time for politicians who will make good use of the campaign season to cajole, entice, convince, confuse Nigerians, however we are convince them.
There's no confuse there.
It depends on what the message is.
Okay.
On why their candidates are the best for the jobs that they have chosen.
And a lot of promises and plans will be reeled out to the eager ears of the electorate. But what issues will drive these campaigns, or should drive the campaigns? Will they be issues that address the myriad of challenges and problems faced by the Nigerian people? Or will they be empty promises from men who set out to enrich themselves?
Yeah, many Nigerians would want issues of security, poverty, unemployment, healthcare, power, education, economy, and others tackled in the next dispensation.
Well, like we usually do on the show, TVC Breakfast sampled the opinions of some Nigerians on the street to find out what the focus of political campaigns ahead of the 2019 general election should be.
The spate of killing is alarming, so they would do well by talking more about the insecurity that we have in this country. And I'll also love that they discuss a matter regarding the economy, because most Nigerians are living, below the poverty level. The candidates that they speak more of matters regarding education also, because if you look at Nigerian education, it's nothing to write home about. That's why you see most students, trying to get out of the country to get better education elsewhere. So, and then I believe so much that it can develop and it can improve the level of education in the country.
They have to talk about how to tackle corruption from our society, and they also have to talk about how the name of Nigeria can be acceptable all over the world. You understand? And so also they have to talk about how the problems of Nigeria can be solved. Creating of jobs. They have to talk about how to create jobs. They have to talk about unemployment. You understand? Among the youth, even the elders too. And how we will have a surplus 3 square meal in Nigeria.
So I want them to give us good roads, electricity. Most important is electricity. Electricity is the most important. Good schools too. The classrooms, because there are some public schools that are bad.
Education is very important. Yes, indeed. You can't help but agree with the last respondent there. Electricity is key because some people will tell you the creator of the universe actually started with saying, "Let there be light." Because without light, there's nothing you can do.
So he could see to do other things.
To do other things.
All right.
Joining us to discuss the concept of issues-based campaigns is publisher The Factor magazine, Japhet Odesonya. Good morning, and so nice to have you on the show.
Good morning. Nice to see you. Nice to see
and
you.
Also with us is a public affairs analyst, Seun Awogbenle. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, maybe before we even go into, breaking it down to what issues really should be paramount in the minds of Nigerians as they go to the polls, maybe we should start with the mood generally, the way that the politicians themselves are, carrying on and conducting themselves in trying to woo, the electorate. It was the late Ibrahim Waziri who said politics without bitterness. The later GNPP presidential candidate. Let's take it from there. Japhet?
Okay, thank you. I think it's also important to look at what the issues are, even before the characters.
Okay.
As for the characters, I am not impressed with the way they carry themselves. I'm yet to be impressed. And it is disheartening. I have not heard of issues. Waziri said, politics without bitterness. Abraham Lincoln described it as heartful dissimulation.
Say that again.
artful dissimulation
Okay.
to win other people to your side. And that must be the major issue. It must be about the people. It must be about ideas. Because democracy itself presupposes that there is institutionalized conflicts. And we have to resolve it. Only ideas will help in resolving it. As for the characters at the moment, I am not impressed. It's not about Atiku not traveling out of the country. It's not about another Sudanese Jubilee. It shouldn't be about those. It should be about issues and how. That is my focus.
Okay. Sheil, let me come to you on this. Since the First and Second and even Third Republic, all the issues that were campaigned on, the First Republic, remember the Action the Action Group, the NPC and the NCNC at that time were all campaigning based on the issue of education,
lines.
issues of health, issues of roads, issues of housing. The Second Republic, in the days of UPN, MPN and all of that, it was the same thing. They talked about education, they talked about housing and all of that. In 1993, the botched republic that didn't take off eventually also campaigned in that regard, the employment and the prosperity and so on. But in the Fourth Republic, one would say it is the same old things when there are so many scientists trying to touch the moon and get to Mars and all of that in other parts of the world. How would you assess the trend so far? Are we getting better in being politicians or in the political system or space, or
are
we're
we
getting
retrogressing?
worse?
Well, basically, I'd like to start by saying that I think the selection process is defective. And then you can't build something on nothing. Okay. A house that is built on nothing can't even stand. The United States of America, which is a bastion of democracy in 2016, the three leading lights of that election, right? They represented the shades of all of America's desires. From Bernie Sanders, talked about, had a progressive and socialist idea, talking about income redistribution or wealth creation and income redistribution. You talked about Hillary Clinton, who believed that America must shatter all levels of glass ceiling that has, impeded quite a lot of people, and especially even the women, from actually getting involved and participating, right? And then I think even when she didn't eventually win, the gains of some of the things that she fought for at that time, you could actually see it in the midterm elections. So Omar Hillian won. A Sudanese,
yeah.
And then even Donald Trump was relatively controversial, still stood for something. He stood for economic prosperity.
America first.
And now, well, you want to say America is thriving and prospering because it's creating jobs and it's getting the job done. You could actually talk about the character, even if the character, the countenance, the composure is almost nothing to write them about. But it was always about issues first. Now, you come to Nigeria and say, why do we actually have, a polity that is actually full of a personality? It is driven by personality attacks, and then, through all forms of vitriol and all forms of mudslinging. It has really never been about the campaigns. Then you start first. What do you have in the political parties? Are the political parties that are the vehicle for leadership selection? What do you have? Those mechanisms for leadership selection, how strong are they? I mean, these are the institutions that should naturally produce the people, because, I mean, as a people, we do not have a choice until political parties actually throw up their candidates. Now, what was the selection process like? I mean, from the two leading political parties, from Zamfara to Rivers, it has been one complaint from the other. And then it does feel like it has been endless. The conflicts that arose from most of the primaries is yet to be resolved. And again, what was it like? Was it really about the issues? Was it really about the issues even at that level? So first, I mean, the point is, I think it is what writer Chidi Amuta described as, that our political parties, they actually lack ideological identity. He says they lack, structural incoherence. I think he said something around structural incoherence, and they also talked about, institutional integrity. They lack institutional integrity. So I think those are the major issues anyway.
Okay, so the question now is, how do we raise the level of discourse when it comes to what, both the way we recruit political players and, of course, what the people themselves demand of them?
Let me also emphasize, that issue-based campaign or campaign discourse has remained the nexus, the only connecting point between the electors and the elected. And to that extent, it is a desiderantum. As a desiderantum, it is mostly urgently.
Could you break that down so we can
Desiderantum.
understand?
When it is a desiderantum, it's from a Greek word, desiderea.
Okay.
It becomes urgently of utmost importance. The fundamentality of issues in politics, that cannot be overemphasized. Now that takes us to the essence of democracy itself. The role of the government, first and foremost, is education. And I think the problem we're having here is political orientation. In Europe, at some point, on the part of the people, the participants, the participants.
Okay.
The participants must be intellectually savvy. Participants in democracy must have unrestricted access to opportunities, state-aided education. State-aided education. That was what Awolowo did. So a situation where the people are not even informed, where you have the majority of the common man on the side of illiteracy, and you want them to take decision in democracy. It is suicidal. At a point in Europe, illiterates were barred from voting. It was a process of purification. Because it is understandable that all men are not equally intellectually gifted. That is given. And we must bear that in mind. You don't expect an Alimajiri to kill in an election where he does not even have any idea about what is to be done or what is being canvassed. So it is absurd. And we have a high rate of illiteracy here. It's the problem. Otherwise, why will you come to me to say, I want to buy your votes? So we must even look at that.
Somebody once described, only recently, I think it's Obi Ezekwesili, one of the female presidential candidates, said, that corruption is actually a taxation of the poor. It's a way of, continuing to take from the poor without necessarily actually giving them anything back. And against the backdrop, when you talk about Europe and all of that, Africa, Zimbabwe, we were discussing the other day, Zimbabwe, with all its problems and all of that, has 80%, 85% literacy
has
level.
the highest literacy level in Africa.
So
Okay, maybe let me come to you on this. The point there is, he mentioned Awolowo. He had a strategy at that time, which has given the Southwest some level of edge when it comes to the number of people who are educated. We still have people who worked side by side with Awolowo at that time. We still have people who understand, who have access to the papers, to the strategy, to the formula that Awolowo used, who have digested these things and understood what political dynamics were at that time and how everything played out. But what's the difference between understanding this thing, knowing what it is, and then implementing it, which we are not seeing?
So first, I'd like to take it from where Mr. Jaffet actually talking about the fundamentality of issues and in the hierarchy of who takes the blame first. And I do not completely think that in that order, the citizens should actually come first. Okay. I think the electoral, the political elite have actually mastered the art of keeping the electorate aground.
Okay.
Because they know that if you are able to keep them aground for the next 4 years, their political value remains the same. So you don't have to spend so much. And here's the thing: the United Nations, Populations Fund is estimating Nigeria's present population at about 195 million.
Yes.
Now, between the 0 to 24 years of people that are between 0 to 24 are said to be 76% of that population. That's about 148 million. Now, what should actually then be the priority of the ruling class? And then first, it has to be education, like I said. Then second, you talk about health. Then you talk about the creation of opportunities, and you talk about employment. But like I have said over and over again, the ruling class would tell you that they have to finance and make ambitious promises on actually implementing some certain infrastructural projects, right? And in that light, they would actually leave investment in the Nigerian people to suffer.
Human capital investment.
Again, it has to be said that investment in competitiveness and infrastructure must actually go hand in hand and side by side with investment in the Nigerian people, because people without ports and railways and roads cannot flourish as much as railways without people cannot sustain the economy. Now, you also talk about because you look at the population demography to actually prioritize what the people need. They need education, they need health, they need opportunities, they need creation of employment. Now, in this same 2018, Nigeria dropped a place, having appreciated in 2017 24 places on the ease of doing business ranking. It has dropped from 145 to 146. What is wrong? I think this should be the promises. It is not about next level of, it shouldn't be next level or getting Nigeria working again without having to prioritize education, health, and creation of opportunities.
In addition to what you've just said, even the World Bank had to, even apologize to Nigeria for always emphasizing the need for infrastructural development against human capital development, which they now own up, saying that is actually the core, that is the foundation on which every other thing, will rest. Still talking about what Nigerians should be asking of the political class come 2019. Restructuring. Somebody in the papers this morning said, in fact, the two major parties are really not honest. They're not sincere about, the issue of restructuring. And, a lot of people have said, if we don't restructure, every other promise or policy, if you like, will fall flat on its face.
Absolutely correct. I love Ojukwu. And if you have read his book, because I am involved, Ojukwu remains my hero. He said Nigerians are suffering characteristically from selective amnesia, selective myopia, and selective hyperopia. That is, we select to remember those things that are convenient. And we select to see only good things that we want to see. And we only pick lessons from those things that are comfortable with us, consistent with our wrong ideas. Now, we have come back to the issue of restructuring. We have always said it. And Atiku seems to be attempting to gain from the non-performance of the present administration in the area of restructuring, because we promised about it. So the question now should be, how do you want to begin? And I do not doubt the sincerity of President Muhammadu Buhari, but I doubt the capacity, to begin that process. I am worried about the political will that I do not see in display in the area of restructuring, because anything short of it, there can be progress. I stand to be corrected. We must begin that. So if we had started, even if it is fiscal, let's begin the process. If it is not geographical, like the vice president has touted, fine. Even if it is the fiscal, let's start something. So that when you go back to the electorate, we say, we have started this. And I said earlier, we profit from the commodification of the electors. We have commodified the election because preponderantly,
We're not buying and selling.
the electors are poor.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have to leave it here now. The point is, what we have to do is to get a second leg of this discussion,
Yes,
so we can,
indeed.
because there are so many areas that we have to delve into to give a better understanding of what this is. Japheth Odesoya, thank you so much for coming on the program, and Shehu Awubinle, thank you so much for coming as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.